Well, good morning, Mr. White.
I was very drawn out. Good morning, Mrs. Angel. How are you?
Oh, my friend. I'm living the dream. I sound a little rusty, but that might be because I was a voyager. I travelled the seas.
Travelled the seas, yes.
I travelled the seas to go to Oregon, Eugene, and then I travelled back over the seas.
Origin.
And then I came back. I'm still a little bit jet lagged.
Can
And then
yes.
shortly after coming back from the travelling the seas, then I travelled, not quite the seas, but I travelled the lands to go down to visit a friend in Melbourne.
Yes.
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 Namely, the beautiful Mrs. White.
The beautiful Mrs. White.
The beautiful Mrs. White, to celebrate with you guys at her 40th birthday. It was a glorious event. I lost my voice singing "You're the Voice" on the dance floor. So my apologies that I sound like I could have a second job on a call line. So how are you?
I'm very well, and I too am struggling to get over the effects of the weekend. But it was a cracking evening. It was great to see you, and back at school this week, and it's going really, really well. What are you up to?
Before we kick into where I am currently, because I travelled the seas and then travelled the seas and travelled the lands and then went back to the lands and then I'm where I am now. The reason why you look so good tonight, you look great and I don't, is because I didn't travel with our amazing equipment that we've been gifted by our beautiful sponsor. So thank you so much to our sponsor, who is Mr. White.
Video Pro.
Excellent. I always take all of the honours off you. So Video Pro are making Mr. White look amazing this evening, and me less so, because I'm in a hotel room.
There's no substitute.
There's no substitute for Video Pro equipment.
That's true.
You are positively radiant. But what is that hanging from the ceiling behind you, Mr. White?
Yes, I look and sound good tonight or this morning because in the background I have our official Teachers Change Lives podcast poster up in the background. And for those who are on the podcast, it's attached to a fan behind my head. It is the podcast's biggest fan. And it is dotted around at other places behind me, and see if the eagle-eyed viewers on YouTube might be able to spot another one.
It's a little episode of Where's Wally, and it's not the big guy in the middle. Awesome. So
hey.
All right. So I am currently in Canberra. So I think I've mentioned previously I have the privilege of working with some schools in Canberra 5 times each year. So this is one of my visits. It's day 3 it's my 3rd visit. So visit 3. I was at one of my schools this morning, today, and it was a wonderful day. They are absolutely thriving, implementing high impact teaching practices. A couple of weeks ago in the media, Ross Fox, who oversees the Canberra and Goulburn Archdiocese in this area, he has done a massive overhaul of the education system here. It's very inspiring. He wanted to implement only teaching practices that work. They've undergone a whole lot of training in all of the schools that fall in this area, and are seeing an absolutely transformative outcomes and improvements already after only 3 years of doing these practices. So very proudly, I'm one of the consultants or coaches that get to come down and work with some of these schools in their mathematics programs in primary schools. And the school I was at today, just I don't know, we've hit a real traction moment, and it's super exciting. So it was very fabulous to be part of it all. Fantastic. Even though I sounded like I was struggling, but I'm not struggling at all.
Not that bad. You're going well. How many schools are you going to visit, and how many schools are covered by this?
Yeah, so it's pretty massive. So every school, every Catholic school in the Archdiocese in Canberra and Goulburn, I think there's like 66 schools or something like that. So it's on a pretty wide scale. And because of the massive impact this has had on student results, now the Archdiocese in Tasmania is now taking it on board. So they are now implementing high impact teaching practices down there and kind of undergoing this retraining process with their staff, which is super exciting. And the teachers that I'm working with today, they're feeling empowered. They're feeling like they're excited about the success that their kids are having. They're sharing practice. It's a beautiful time to be a teacher in the Catholic system in Canberra and Goulburn, and I'm very privileged to be a part of seeing that'll happen.
Fantastic! What a big rollout! 66 schools.
I know, it's very very
amazing.
Cool. But, Ross Fox, who wasn't an educator, so he just came in and asked some questions around. So what are we doing, and how do we do it, and what does the science say behind this, and then I had a look at that, and then has then slowly and then quickly rolled all of this out, and quickly have seen a real shift in student outcomes.
And
so
it's
exciting.
Not really surprising, is it? I mean, in more walks of life, in more industries, we should be asking, well, what does the science say? What do the data say? Let's work from that and put that at the forefront of our thinking, and then reshape what we're doing in order to maximise the outcomes.
Couldn't agree more.
Brilliant.
And it sounds simple, but then there's politics, there's so much involved in all of it. So it's exciting to see this happening on such a large scale across a whole system, and then another whole state now is taking on board. Super, super exciting.
Yeah, very exciting.
Enough of me.
Wonderful.
What's been happening with you other than partying on with your gorgeous wife? What else has been happening?
I've been at a conference for the last 2 days with the Geography Teachers Association of Victoria. I'm a geography teacher as well as an English teacher, and it's been fantastic. It's been really, really good. The first day was a series of discussions and lectures, and today was brilliant because we got to go out in the field, and a big part of geography is field work. So got out into the field and gathered some data, and then looked at new ways to do that, new mostly technological advances that we can look at, the ways we use different tools that we have. I mean, this iPhone thing that we all have, or this smart device that we all have, just empowers the students. It empowers everyone, really. But there are so many opportunities to be taking data, and the students can use that in their report. It's brilliant. It's really, it really is exciting.
That's great. How cool that a conference being so hands-on. That's amazing.
That's the way geography teachers roll.
Yeah, that's great. But often it's not the way. I do remember at university sitting through a 2-hour, and I did go to 3 universities, so it's okay. This doesn't give away which university this was. I sat through a 2-hour lecture on engaging teaching practices. It was just 2 hours.
And it was boring.
If that ain't an oxymoron, I don't know what it is. All right, tell me you're impressed. Is that not a use of an oxymoron? Not as I do.
Do as I say, not as I do. Yeah, right.
Exactly. So it's not always the way that you get to go to professional learning that actually is in line with what you do. So that's I'm excited. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's good fun. It's good fun. Cool. Good fun. I've also got I've got parent-teacher interviews this week as well. A very busy week for me. Yeah. Parent-teacher interviews, and I'm excited about those because it's an opportunity again to have a chat to parents and to talk about the learning of the students, and basically just to have a chat and get to know each other better, because I know most of them, but for some people it's first semester with them, so I'm learning as well. So it's fantastic. It really, really is an exciting week for me.
That's great. That's great. Well, and obviously building off the excitement after seeing my husband and I, obviously, over the weekend, having a stay literally at your house, it would have just blown your mind.
Blown my mind. I'm all worn out. I'm overexcited. I'm overstimulated.
Having a piece of Queensland right there in your living room for 2 whole days. It was out of this world.
It was.
All right. So this evening we have actually joined so that we can listen to one of the interviews that I recorded whilst overseas. over the seas to where I went to Oregon in Eugene. Can I just recommend to any Australian that you should go to Eugene, because they think Aussies are these mythical creatures. They think that our accent is like this musical, lyrical, beautiful thing rather than just bogan Queensland. I nearly didn't leave. If it wasn't for my gorgeous husband and my child, I would never have come back, because they thought that we were just amazing over there. So Aussies, head to Eugene. And I was over there for the NIFTY conference, which is the National Institute for Direct Instruction. And so I've had a few educational heroes in my career that I've stumbled across because of research that I've read or readings that I've read. Many years ago, I got to meet one of my educational heroes, Jeffrey Canada, after I won a teaching award, and I got to go over to Harlem to look at the Harlem Children's Zone over there, and it was life-changing stuff. And actually, I didn't get to meet Jeffrey over in Harlem. I actually had to stalk him all the way to Dubai until I captured him in a courtroom where not. Anyway, it sounds weird, but he was debating. He was in a debate in a conference against somebody. It was phenomenal. Anyway, I got to live a dream there by meeting the man who has really inspired my career. The other person who has really inspired my career is a man who is now, unfortunately, sadly passed, Siegfried Engelmann, who was one of the founders of direct instruction. And so he is a genius. He came up with direct instruction, and then now what we know as the science of learning is totally enacted by direct instruction. So he kind of unlocked the code back a long time ago and worked out the way that kids really learn. And then the way that I came across this was that one of my great leaders that I worked with pointed me towards Project Follow Through, which is the largest educational research that has ever been conducted in the world over a period of 10 years. And it showed that over tracking students over a period of 10 years, over 9 different pedagogies, of which they shortlisted down to seeing not across 9 different pedagogies, which ones had the highest effect size. So direct instruction came out the highest in all 3 categories. So a positive effect size in academic growth, in higher order thinking skills, and also in building self-esteem. So none of the other ones that they looked at saw a positive effect size in all 3 of those areas, and direct instruction saw a staggering positive effect size in all 3 of those areas. So when I read that research, I became really interested in direct instruction, which then led me to obviously know who created it, Siegfried Engelmann. So this and everything we do at Mastery Schools Australia is underpinned by the science of learning. So we do a lot of direct instruction. So when I was given the opportunity by the founders of my organisation, Toni and Michael Roberts, to go over to the NIFTY conference was super exciting. But then even more exciting was that the course that I did, the administrator's course, which was only 12 people across the world that were doing that course this year, one of my instructors was Kurt Engelmann, the son of my absolute educational hero being Siegfried Engelmann, known as Zig. And so I got to spend 5 days locked in a room with Kurt Engelmann. Super exciting for me, less so for Kurt Engelmann, I can assure you. And was able to just learn so much more stuff about direct instruction. And I got to sit down with him not only for my 5 days, I asked him to spend a lunchtime with me as well, so I could capture how he feels about education and some of his ideas and ideologies and kind of his education as well.
Fantastic.
So shall we have a listen to my interview with Kurt Engelmann? As our awesome producer is clicking buttons, please know I was very jet lagged. Very, very jet lagged as I was interviewing Kurt Engelmann. No judgment.
No judgment.
All right. As I said, I am the most fortunate educator in the Australian country right now to be here with meeting one of my educational heroes, one of the family of heroes. I am at the National Institute for Direct Instruction Conference and I'm getting to meet with Kurt Engelmann. So obviously his father Sig was one of the creators of direct instruction, and so we're here to obviously talk with Kurt today about we always kick off with talking about a great teacher and how they have inspired you. So did you want to kick off with that? Tell us a bit about your upbringing and a teacher who inspired you.
Well, upbringing would take a while. I'll start with the teacher who inspired me, and that was Dr. Dirk Tenbrink, who was my physics teacher in high school. He happened to also be the father of one of my best friends, but just as a teacher, he was very inspirational. A quirky guy who not only knew everyone's name, but he used to take roll in those days. I don't know if it's still done in high schools in Australia, taking roll, and he gave us each nicknames. I think mine was Kurtleman. That was, quite a ways back, almost half a century ago.
Yep.
And he also had sayings that he put up on the board that were physics related, but they went beyond that. One of them I recall quite well was, "The universe is not only stranger than we know, it is stranger than we can know." Pretty philosophical there.
Deep. That's very
It
deep.
is.
Yeah.
And on the other end, he had one that was, "A difference to make a difference must be a difference." And that one in particular stuck with me because as you go through life, as you go through getting your degrees and your job, you have to know what is worth the time to pay attention to, instead of always making sure that the papers are just completely in place. For instance, all the pens and pencils where they need to be. Does that make a difference? And that's helped me in the job that I have now, which is student performance is the focus, and everything builds out from there.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And so what can you talk to us about your alumni? So where did you go to school and then what? Where did you go to university? What did you study? And how does that link to what you did now? So you were inspired by a physics teacher. So where did you go to elementary school?
The elementary school was at Garden Hills Elementary in Champaign-Urbana, because direct instruction started at the University of Illinois as a preschool program. A lot of people don't know that. And there's a great black and white video of my dad teasing with kids who have been through 1 or 2 summers of preschool with only 20 minutes a day. And if you've seen it, you've seen the incredible math that they know.
Yes.
And it doesn't show direct instruction teaching. So that's Garden Hills Elementary. Finished up. We moved out to Illinois. I'm from Illinois to Eugene in 1970. Finished up my 6th grade year, because in those days elementary schools were 6th grade at Condon Elementary, where actually the law school is now. The university owns the building, and then to Roosevelt Middle School, which had a program that was really quite anti-DI. It let the teachers create their own courses and kids select which courses they wanted. So it was based on popularity, although the parents could sign off. So like our parents said, well, you're going to be taking English every quarter, you're going to be taking math every quarter, science every quarter. You can't just choose to do archery, which was one of the fun things that I had.
Everyone liked to know, yes.
But even within that language arts, for instance, I took a poetry class as a 7th or 8th grader. I can't remember exactly, but it had an influence on me. And then went from there to South Eugene High, home of the Axemen. But now it's the Axe, because Axemen, the men was dropped.
Oh yes, okay. So politically correct. Well done.
Yes, acceptable broadly. After that, I went up to the University of Washington for 1 year, and decided I didn't want to be away. Came back at the University of Oregon. Physics was I did take physics for 1 year, and then I just decided that wasn't what my interest was. And even though I hadn't really had a lot of success in language, I took history and Russian. So then, after, as part of my senior year, I went abroad and studied Russian at LGU, Leningrad State University. And then that became my passion. I got my master's in Russian Area Studies, as it was called, at the University of Washington. Got my PhD in geography. I've only taken one education class. So here's the big secret. My experience in education was from the time I was 14 years old, I was working at the Corp. I was tutoring. My dad and others would come in. So I wrote items for all kinds of programs in reading, reading mastery and corrective reading, expressive writing, spelling mastery also, which I know is big.
Big in
Down
Australia.
under,
Yeah.
that's right. But what happened between the time I got my graduate degree, my undergraduate degree at the University of Oregon, and went off to get my master's, that's when I had a few very intensive years working with severely autistic children. There was a methodology that my father and Jeff Colvin put together, and I picked it up really quickly. And after just a couple of years, I was running a summer school at age 23 for autistic kids and nonverbal children using this methodology. So that was really an important time because I went off to the university in this Soviet and post-Soviet focus, went over to the Soviet Union, was one of the first people to stay in Uzbekistan, Americans to be in Uzbekistan, and I studied Uzbek, don't know it nearly as well as Russian. And then, but it was in 2000 that my father asked me to come back from Seattle. And so that was my next extensive training period because I was actually administrative director is what I was called, but I was the eyes and ears of Mary Gleason, who's one of the authors of Rewards. She was our director of training at the time and had Gary Davis and Jerry Silbert, et cetera. In other words, I get this incredible
Pioneers
mentorship.
and what the conversations that you would have been a part of,
And very, very specific direction. When I'd fly down to Los Angeles, we were working with 4 huge schools there, K through 5 schools that had, the smallest of them had gigantic schools. I would report back daily and get input daily on what to do. So that was a huge way in which I learned the direct instruction model.
Yeah, wow. And then so that was in 2000, and then 2023.
Right, where have the 23 years gone? I would say.
Yes.
Kind of starting to show around the edges,
Never.
so to speak.
Not since the videos that I watched of you in the black and white videos. Very, very cool. So there's a lot that's happened in the world in the last 23 years. And possibly not all of our listeners know about Project Follow Through. Do you want to talk a little bit about Project Follow Through?
I can, and from my perspective, it was one growing up in which my father was away. He was away half the time I was growing up, going to the different sites. So Project Follow Through was and still is the largest educational experiment in the history of the world that we know about. And the notion was to see what could be done with students of high poverty. Title I is the name of the federal program. What could be done to improve their performance? And the federal government really opened up the gates to the full range of different educational theories. And so each model was given various schools to implement the model, and there were pre-tests, post-tests, a lot of money that went into this, with something like 178 communities across the country involved. So that you had interurban, you had rural, you had different ethnic groups, whether it was African American, Native American, Hispanic schools. The way that the models were connected with schools was that there were parent committees that selected what the schools would implement. And the sponsors would come to these conferences and do presentations on what's a model, yes, what you could choose from. And direct instruction was the most popular of all those models. And there were sites, as I said, Cherokee, North Carolina. I'm trying to remember the name of the one. Starts with Rosebud, South Dakota. These were all names I heard about because my father was coming back from them. As first when he went to make presentations, and then much more so implementing what was going on. There is online, I don't know if it's online, we had a couple years ago a celebration, a meeting of the 50th anniversary. There was something at the university, then also at the Engelmann Becker Corporation, in which all of the project managers who are still alive got together, and there are videotapes of that too. And I think we should put that together into some sort of documentary.
That's a great idea, yeah.
The final evaluation took place in 1977, so it was 1968 is when it started, 1977, and the results were really clear, but evidently haven't been conclusive to a lot of people. The kids in the direct instruction model were higher in everything. So in mathematics, in reading, in spelling, those were the, in language, those were the academic subjects that were tested, but they were also tested in terms of basic skills, problem-solving skills. There were three different categories: higher order thinking skills. Thank you.
Yep.
And affective skills, self-image, how they thought about themselves. And consistently, the PI kids were higher than all the others, but not only higher than all the others. And there were only 9 models that made the grade. They had to have multiple sites. So originally there were more models involved, but they weren't selected by the parents. But you still had a huge range of Piagetian and discovery models included, as well as behavioral models, the whole spectrum. But if you take a look in terms of just the scores, the percentile scores of the kids, they went from the 20th percentile to nearly the 50th or above the 50th. In language, the kids were above the 51st percentile. In reading, they were only at the 40th percentile. But who can complain
about that kind of growth?
20% growth in comparison to their peers.
Yeah.
And we would love to redo something like that. This is before NIFTY was created, which is to help to make sure that there is systematic. There was training, but we made it much more systematic. Coaches training for administrative leaders, such as yourself. So we would love to redo it again, because, and the programs have been even improved upon.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just so, it is so systematic. There's no margin for error. It's not like you're testing. You're not trialing things on kids. This is it. This is the whole package that is hand-on-heart stuff that works for kids. Not just. I love that it doesn't just improve low-level kids. It improves all students, and not just low. For kids from a poverty background. It works for all kids, and their self-esteem improves. Everything improves, and teachers note that they're making a massive difference. All right, so what next? Hopefully a big study, the next big study, the next biggest educational study to come out and have a look at it all again.
Well, it's really hard to predict what's going to happen next. I wish I could dictate what would happen next. I tell you what our goal would be, and this doesn't matter where in the world it takes place, is to have the full immersion model, the comprehensive model with DIUs as the core for all kids starting at the earliest grade level, whether it's kindergarten, reception, and have them go through the programs, all of the programs in DI, and then have good small DI teaching at their skill level and see the degree to which we can accelerate their learning from K to 12. The elementaries feeding into the secondary school or schools to see the degree to which we could do this. And unfortunately, we've had a few pieces of a feeder system like that in place, and a new administrator, a new leader comes in, they want to do something different or improve upon it, and so it's fallen apart. Where things go next, the science of reading is really big here. I think it may be
massive
big
in Australia.
but how it's getting interpreted is sometimes mind-boggling. There have been a couple of states like Arkansas and Texas that have deemed that reading mastery doesn't do systematic, direct instruction of phonics. And you're wondering who is making these decisions. And so there has not been a big rush so far to direct instruction, much less getting partners who share this vision of having kids start at the earliest grade level and getting instruction that is clear, that on a daily basis corresponds to their skill level, teach them the mastery so they're ready each and every day.
Effective, efficient, and so that they lays a solid platform for a bright future for every single child, not just for some children.
And we have had pieces of this in the past. City Springs Elementary, which maybe I've mentioned that session or not, 100% free or reduced lunch, virtually all of us 100%. They had continuing kids who started the program in kindergarten, who finished all of the reading mastery levels, and then were in a middle school history text, understanding U.S. history, as 4th and 5th graders. So they were from high poverty backgrounds, language poor backgrounds. But if you build up that language understanding as well as the other content and skills, that's what you can achieve.
Absolutely. Oh, it is exciting. And I know you've got a million other places to be. So thank you so much for spending time with me and all of the other teachers who tune in for Teachers Change Lives podcast. I know that that teachers are leaving the profession, and it's just so imperative that they don't. Any last statements about how important teachers are to the world?
Teachers are the ones who do it. And one reason why I am interested in this Administrative Leadership Institute is because the environment needs to be set so teachers can succeed, where they have students who can be homogeneously grouped, so they're not trying to teach to the high and the low ones at the same time. They have a program that is clear, that has an incremental step structure so that kids can learn to master, and all the other supports, the training, etc. So yes, teachers, please stick in there. If you are doing direct instruction, please do it with fidelity. If there's something that's holding it back, go to your local school leader, because we want it to be successful. And it's only in that way can we really demonstrate how students can be so successful in this approach.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. One of my educational heroes. I've just ticked a bucket list item off. I'm sitting here with Kurt Engelmann. I've got so many people that I've got to go back to Aussie and show this video to. Some of my leaders who introduced me to Project Follow Through. I want to say hi to Troy Ascott. Can you say hi to Troy Ascott?
Hello, Troy.
Oh my gosh, that's going to rock this world. All right. Thank you for everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Teachers Change Lives podcast. See you later.
Wow, how good's that?
Oh, how much! I was fangirling. Like I
don't think
so
I've ever seen you so nervous.
I was a total hardcore fangirl. I'm so embarrassed, but I'm not embarrassed because
embrace it, love
living
it.
my dream. So many
Wow.
ums and ahs, but it's okay. And absolutely, I want to just pause and say, a massive thank you to Troy Ascott. He was so imperative to my leadership journey. He challenged me in lots of good ways and lots of bad ways, but he has absolutely been critical to making me the teacher and the leader that I am now. And one of the he linked up with Michael Roberts, who is the founder of Mastery Schools Australia, which is who I'm working for now. And Toni Hatten-Roberts is somebody I've employed at once I heard about Project Follow Through. There is no greater educator in Australia other than Toni Hatten-Roberts. She's the only person who's won the Direct Instruction Educator of the Year, the first non-American who won the Direct Instruction Educator of the Year. And she's an Australian. She's one of the founders of Mastery Skills Australia. So one of the very first people in Australia to be enacting DI with fidelity. Like, I am genuinely living my dream and getting to meet an educational hero.
Yeah, wow, what a bucket list.
And being so cool about it.
Oh, you did. With such grace and aplomb. Well done, well done. I didn't realise that DI started or had its origin in preschool.
Yeah. Well, they've got to start right at the bottom.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I don't know why I didn't think of it. I just thought it was a higher, later years sort of thing, but it's definitely not. I mean, that makes so much sense.
It's about laying that strong foundation,
yeah, absolutely.
so that then we don't need intervention in the future. The big dream for Nifty is that we don't need intervention. If we lay that super strong foundation, and the whole thing with direct instruction is that it's only a maximum of 15% of new knowledge introduced each day, and 85% of old knowledge. But Science of Learning has said that we need 24 to 40 repetitions of something before it gets to long-term memory. How often do you get to cover content 24 to 40 times, Mr. White?
No, very well, never really.
Yes, exactly.
In fact, the amount of times that we just look at what's on the curriculum, we just look at each other and just go, we're going to struggle to get through this. How do we cover this? And really, if we're missing a couple of lessons and look at each other, so we're not going to get through this content once, we're definitely not doing it 24 to 40 times.
Of course not.
Absolutely.
Which Science of Learning is saying that we actually have to cover these things, and not just cover it, we have to cover it well. There's better exposures and less better exposures. And direct instruction, there's a lot of verbalizing in direct instruction, and we know that verbalization, if you verbalize something, if everybody says something aloud, there's 11 to 12% better chance of remembering it. And direct instruction is built on a whole lot of verbal rehearsal, which is really, really important. So if we lay that strong foundation in your spelling, reading, and maths from that early years, then we don't have to, there's not clawing so much back. You have a closer to a homogenous group, like you talked about, then as you're teaching. But rarely is there a grade 3 group right now that is actually at a grade 3 level. They're all over the place.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I mean, the focus of teaching is individual learning plans, or making sure that you're catering to every student, and that becomes so broad a spectrum that there's just no way that you could do it. And so you start clumping the students into small groups, and that doesn't work either.
Yeah, so it does work if you use direct instruction. You don't go off on tangents, you don't waste, you teach bell to bell. And my goodness, this professional development, I was so jet lagged. Obviously, we got over there, flew in on Saturday, arrived on Saturday. Obviously, we went to some wineries on Sunday, got asked to leave a winery. Well, we got transferred from one winery to another because they closed, and they were happy with our patronage, but they were closing, and our Uber hadn't come, so they just moved us on to the next winery, which was beautiful as well. And then we hit 5 days of lectures, and they weren't lectures. There was constant checking for understanding. That it was, so I was so jet lagged, and I learnt in a room with 12 other people for an hour and a half increments, but because the teaching and learning was so quality, I at no stage did I feel like I was drifting off or I was losing track of anything, because it was so engaging constantly. So really impressive, really impressive professional development when you've got somebody who's traveled so far to be there, and even not in their perfect physical state is able to, for 5 days, learn for an hour and a half in 3 sessions throughout the day. So the 4.5 hours of solid learning, and they teach bell to bell. If you're late, you don't get one of your little slips for well done, you arrived on time. And I'm a people pleaser. I went over in my luggage because I won so many books, these amazing books, because I was there on time. I was the first one there, the last one to leave. It was amazing professional development.
Yeah, amazing. Unbelievable. And just on the specifics of what he was talking about there, the maths, the reading, the spelling, problem solving, higher order, and self-esteem, which is often so important in learning, obviously.
Yeah.
But I really liked what he was saying about the idea of phonics and moving away from teaching phonics and to whole language, as if students are going to just through osmosis just absorb all the scope of language all at once. It's got to be broken up. It's got to be incremental, and it's on us to create those learning experiences so we can actually employ this technique that clearly works.
Yeah, and thankfully there's a movement. There's a science of reading movement right now, and our government in Australia has gotten on board with recognising that phonics is important. That phonics isn't science of reading; it's a part of science of reading, absolutely. They're starting with phonemic awareness and obviously vocab, and there's more to it than just phonics, but it's absolutely imperative that we do teach kids phonemic awareness and phonics. Absolutely imperative. Otherwise, we're leaving them behind. And any teachers out there, point to me the 5 to 7 kids that you're happy to just leave behind and make illiterate as they go along if we don't teach them in this particular way.
Yes.
It's not okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Fantastic.
He wasn't he?
Brilliant.
Oh my goodness! So in a couple of weeks, you can't actually believe that this gets it's literally equally as good, because you want to know who the other interview that I have coming out of Eugene is. Turns out Kurt Engelmann has a twin brother named he does, named Owen Engelmann. So stay tuned to watch me get just as equally excited.
Yes. I can't believe you resisted the temptation to run them back to back. That's brilliant.
I know. Look at me exerting some self-control. So stay tuned. It's a different story though with Owen. It's a very, very different story. They've got very different stories to tell. They're very, very different people. So Kurt is the president of the National Institute for Direct Instruction, and Owen oversees the Engelmann Beckett Corporation. So he's all about the programs that they're running, and Kurt is all about the training of awesome. How to deliver those programs. So it's a different story, a very different experience that they've had with growing up. So be excited, everyone. It's not just going to be the same story all over again, but you will see me fangirling all over again. So stay tuned most definitely for that. I'm getting like hot and bothered. I'm just even not because anyway, it's highly professional, very excited about the educational journey that I got to go on, and I get to share it with my friend now, Mr.
Absolutely.
White, as well.
Yeah,
which
and
is
everyone
great.
else out there. It's fantastic. It's brilliant. Love it. I love
Indeed.
the enthusiasm that you're bringing to it. But, what an amazing guy, and I love the passion with which he told his story.
So good
Brilliant.
news is that later on, a day later after I interviewed Kurt, and I had asked him to sign one of Zig's books, his father's books, and he's like, "Oh,
Of course you did.
that's not That's not my work. I can't sign that. But I have written a book and it's coming out next year. I was like, Kurt, I asked you what's next in the interview and you didn't mention that you've written a book and there's more coming out. And he's like, oh, you're right. Can we do another interview
Awesome.
later in the year? So mark this place. Let's hear all about what Kurt's latest research has been. And I'm hoping that we will get to interview him later on in the year and tell you all about his book that is being released in 2024. So stay tuned, everybody.
Wow, that's some serious sizzle. That's great.
It is. It really is. All right. Well, let's leave on some serious sizzle then, Mr. White.
Yes.
And let's see you next week then for another episode of Teachers Change Lives podcast.
Look forward to it. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.